Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and certainly thought-provoking document.
It definitely is. Deals with some pretty significant shifts.
Exactly. It examines this observed shift within a particular ideological group
Looking at educational standards, right?
and how that connects to ideological alignment.
Yeah.
And just so everyone's clear, our mission here in this deep dive isn't really about taking sides.
No, definitely not. It's about understanding the source's perspective.
We're trying to meticulously extract the core arguments, the observations presented in the material itself.
Just laying out what the document claims.
Exactly. Helping you, our listener, get a concise and thorough understanding of its claims.
And what's fascinating is how it weaves together different threads, doesn't it? You've got historical shifts, the role of education, cultural stuff, even social media dynamics.
Right.
All contributing, according to the source, to what it controversially calls a poorly educated yet highly indoctrinated left.
That phrase definitely jumps out.
Yeah.
Poorly educated, yet highly indoctrinated.
It's a very strong claim.
Yeah, it suggests like a swap intellectual rigor, maybe traded for deep adherence to certain belief.
Almost regardless of the factual basis is the implication.
And to understand how the source thinks we got there, it actually starts with history.
It looks back at the evolution of leftist thought.
Highlighting that traditional emphasis on social justice, equity, empowering marginalized groups. That foundation.
Exactly. That's the starting point it identifies. But then the source points to this really significant ideological shift starting kind of late 20th century.
Okay. What drove that, according to the source?
Well, it points to the influence of ideas like postmodernism.
Questioning objective truths and grand narratives.
Right. And critical theory, which, scrutinizes power structures. And alongside that, a growing focus on identity politics.
Where groups rally around shared identities and experiences. The source cites Hunter here, I believe.
It does. And the key point the document makes is that these newer doctrines sometimes prioritized adherence to beliefs.
Over what?
Over, say, critical engagement with diverse viewpoints, even dissenting ones.
So that's the big shift it's identifying. And how does this then connect to education? What does this mean for institutions?
Well, this is where the source gets quite critical. It claims that instead of focusing on fostering critical thinking skills—
The traditional goal, you might say.
Right. The emphasis increasingly turned toward promoting ideological conformity within these institutions.
So less about exploring ideas, more about aligning with them.
That's the argument. And the source raises concerns about, well, the quality of education, the breadth of perspectives offered, potentially leading, it suggests, to a generation that maybe struggles with truly independent thought.
The source then really zeroes in on educational institutions themselves. It uses that phrase, breeding grounds, for a particular brand of leftist thought.
That's quite pointed.
It was a very pointed language.
So what evidence or observations does it offer to, substantiate that kind of claim? Well, it brings up a couple of points. First, faculty composition. It highlights what it calls an overrepresentation of left-leaning faculty, particularly in humanities and social sciences. It cites Stenger on this.
Okay, faculty leanings. What else?
And then student demographics. It points to data showing a significant rise in students identifying as left-leaning compared to conservatives, citing the Higher Ed Research Institute and Harrison.
So, for the source, these numbers paint a picture of an environment that's ideologically tilted.
That's the interpretation presented, yes.
And what's the claimed effect of that disparity then? In the classroom, day to day?
The document suggests that in such environments, dissenting opinions might be discouraged.
Actively discouraged or just sort of subtly silenced?
It implies potentially both. Creating a climate, it argues, that's more about indoctrination than genuine critical discussion.
Okay.
And it also looks at curricula. The source says they often emphasize social justice initiatives, critiques of power structures.
Which sounds aligned with the ideology.
Exactly. But the claim is that this leaves little room for alternative perspectives, resulting, the source argues, in an education prioritizing ideological allegiance over developing, say, sharp analytical skills.
Right, which circles back to that initial claim about education quality. Now, the source doesn't stop at formal education, does it? It talks about broader cultural forces, too.
That's right. It argues that wider cultural narratives play a pretty significant role in this phenomenon.
How so? What kind of cultural forces?
Well, it looks at media portrayals, cultural products, Think TV shows, books, movies. It suggests these often reinforce certain leftist ideologies, promoting narratives around victimhood, systemic oppression, calls for social justice. It references gross here.
So a kind of informal curriculum delivered through culture.
That's essentially the idea the source puts forward, shaping perceptions outside the classroom.
And then, of course, there's social media. That must feature heavily.
Oh, absolutely. The source sees social media as a powerful amplifier.
In what way?
Primarily through echo chambers. Platforms often show users content that aligns with what they already believe.
Right. Keeps you clicking.
Exactly. So it constantly reinforces those specific leftist viewpoints, often without much pushback or exposure to different ideas. And it brings in Tefekci's work on algorithms here.
Algorithms designed for engagement, not necessarily for balanced perspectives.
Precisely. They amplify certain narratives, solidify beliefs, and can marginalize dissent. The source concludes these dynamics really push a worldview that might favor ideological affirmation over critical inquiry.
Okay, moving on to another key theme. Identity politics. The source discusses this quite a bit.
Yes, it sees it as a crucial aspect of contemporary leftist thought.
And while the aim is often positive, like elevating underrepresented voices, how does the source argue it impacts things, perhaps negatively?
Well, the source argues that while the aim is representation, it can sometimes lead to a very narrow focus on specific group experiences.
To the exclusion of what?
Potentially overlooking broader societal issues that cut across different identities. It cites Hayes, suggesting that the emphasis on identity politics over, say, universal class or economic struggles has led to some fragmentation within leftist movements.
Fragmentation, so breaking into smaller identity-focused groups rather than broader coalitions.
That's the dynamic the source describes, a potential trade-off, it argues, within that progressive framework.
And how does that alleged fragmentation then feed back into the educational experience, according to the source?
The assertion is that this fragmentation can actually dilute the educational experience in some ways.
How so? That sounds a bit counterintuitive.
Well, the argument is if the focus becomes very granular on specific identities, it can make it harder to build cohesive arguments or coalitions around those bigger society-wide issues.
I see. Less focus on overarching theories.
Potentially. Instead of cultivating, say, a deep understanding of diverse philosophical foundations for social or economic theory, the focus on identity might inadvertently narrow the perspective, limiting engagement, perhaps, with critical theories that address more universal concerns.
Okay, so pulling these threads together now. The history, the institutions, culture, identity politics. What's the bottom line, according to the source, for critical thinking skills?
The core argument is that as individuals consume more and more information that aligns with what the source labels politically correct views,
their ability to think critically, independently, might actually diminish.
That's the concern raised. It suggests this can lead to a kind of intellectual stagnation. The fundamental point being that when educational systems, as the source claims, prioritize ideological compliance over genuine inquiry.
The consequences are bad for developing independent thinkers.
Detrimental is the word used, yes.
And does the source point to any specific visible outcome of this alleged decline in critical engagement, like a real-world example?
It does. It highlights the rise of what he calls cancel culture.
Ah, okay. How does that fit in?
Well, it points to situations where dissenting opinions are, often quickly shut down, marginalized, or attacked. It cites Blair on this.
So it's not just about public disagreement, but the way disagreement is handled.
Exactly. The source suggests it creates a kind of intellectual chilling effect. This climate, it argues, makes people hesitant to engage with opposing views for fear of backlash.
Which hinders that robust exchange of ideas needed for, well, for anything really, but especially democracy.
Precisely. And the source even suggests it could lead to more aggressive responses or attempts to suppress speech.
That's a fairly stark observation about the climate of debate. So looking ahead, what trajectory does the source foresee if these trends continue? Is it pessimistic?
It does warn about increasing societal polarization.
Driven by these educational practices and ideological fervor.
Yes, it links them directly. It suggests that those on the left, specifically, might find themselves more isolated within their own ideological bubbles.
More echo chambers, basically.
Exactly. Leading to a potential disconnection from mainstream political discussion and just deepening misunderstandings and hostility towards other viewpoints.
It paints a picture of growing division.
It does.
But it doesn't just leave it there, does it? Does the source offer any kind of path forward, any solutions?
Thankfully, yes. It does conclude with the way forward. It suggests that for the left to, and this is a quote, reclaim its historical role as a champion of progress and inclusivity.
It needs to address these issues head on.
Correct. Specifically, the educational challenges. This means, according to the source, reinvigorating a focus on genuine critical thinking.
And actually encouraging dissent, making space for disagreement.
Actively encouraging it within thought processes, yes. The goal being to create an environment where diverse ideas can coexist and be rigorously debated, which, it argues, would improve educational outcomes and contribute to a more vibrant intellectual public life.
This deep dive has certainly laid out a complex and, challenging perspective.
It really has, connecting political thought, education, culture.
A lot to think about there.
Definitely. And stepping back, I think the source really underscores the importance of critical engagement, doesn't it? And intellectual openness, really, no matter where you fall on the ideological spectrum.
That feels like a key takeaway. It's a call for robust, honest inquiry across the board. And perhaps a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over. If the kinds of mechanisms described in our source educational systems, cultural narratives, social media algorithms, if they can shape one political viewpoint so profoundly.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, how might these same forces be subtly influencing all of our beliefs, regardless of our political stance?
And what does that mean for how we understand things collectively? How we find common ground or even define truth?
A big question to leave hanging.